Okay, so let's say what are different ways in which we can create a function, or what is first we'll try to understand what is functions. What are different ways in which we can create a function, and what are different types of functions that we have in TypeScript. Okay, so let's get started with first the definition, like what is function. I've also believe prepared prepared something which is this one for us. I mean, like completion of this, there are a couple of things that I have to add, and I'll share with you people in next couple of days this document as well. This will be a complete document for TypeScript. Okay, so what is in general a function? So function basically is a building block of code. That means a block of code that we write inside a curly braces. So what is block of code? Basically, functions is function. So what is block of code? In general, whatever we write inside a curly braces is known as a block of code. Right? So what is basically a block of code? Sometimes we'll be writing some kind of business logic, some kind of logic that we can use a multiple number of times. The same logic that we can use a multiple number of times. That's why we create a function. We in general create few steps inside the function and then wrap it inside the curly braces, and that will become a function part, a block of code which will be creating using a function, and that again we can utilize n number of times wherever we require the similar kind of code or similar block of code. We can automatically use the same function that we'll be creating. So why do we create a function? It's just because readability and maintainability will be very easy in terms of whenever we create few lines of code inside a function. So let's say example, we have few lines of code that we have written. Example, line 1, line 2, line 3, and so on. And we know that these 3 lines of code can be utilized n number of times inside our test, right? So instead of writing every time these 3 lines of code, what we can do is we can wrap all these 3 lines of code inside a function. By creating a function, we can write all these 3 lines of code inside a function, so that only one time we'll have to write these 3 lines of code, and going forward, we can use all the 3 lines like this function wherever and whenever it requires. Okay, so what happened over here is like maintainability will be very easy. Let's say if we have to change anything inside these 3 lines of code, if you have to change anything, then we basically have to change inside the function itself. Else, if we would have written all these 3 lines of code wherever and whenever it is required, then every time we'll have to go and check, validate where we have to change the lines, or where we have to change the syntax, or any kind of things that we require to change as a part of these 3 lines. Right? If we write a function, then only one time we require to change, and everywhere it will be applicable because we have created a function, and that function we are trying to utilize. Okay, so if you see in terms of definition, it says that it is a building block of code which basically used for readability, maintainability, and reusability. So reusability in the sense that is what I talked about. We write few lines of code, few lines of code inside a function, and that we can utilize anywhere going forward inside the script. Okay. So as we have in terms of JavaScript, likewise, we have in terms of JavaScript, the similar way we'll be creating in TypeScript as well. If you have already gone through with the JavaScript functions inside the courses, then you might be knowing like there are different ways in which we generate a JavaScript function. In the same way, we have similar way, there is no difference at all. The only difference is that we provide the type part over here, which is data type in terms of function in TypeScript, whereas in JavaScript, we do not provide any type. Apart from that, everything will be similar. Everything will be similar. As you see over here, unlike JavaScript, TypeScript allows you to use type annotation. What is type annotation? That means what is the data type that we are trying to use for a parameter or the function trying to return the value. Okay, so let's see. I've given in detail, complete detail. You can go through with the document as well whenever you get time. I'll share this document within next couple of days. And from then you can refer it as a part of TypeScript tutorial. So let's see what are what are different types of functions that we have. Okay, so there are different ways, different types of functions that we have. Mainly we have two types of functions in TypeScript. Two types of functions. One is known as named function. Okay, and second is known as anonymous function. Anonymous function, which is also known as unnamed function. Unnamed function. Yes, you're right. This is unnamed function. That means we can declare a function without having the name of the function as well. So this is also have this basically have flexibility have also given in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript that we can write a function without the function name as well. Okay. Again, there are different ways in which we create an anonymous function, which will be basically a normal anonymous function, and then second will be like this is again as a part of anonymous function itself. So inside anonymous function, we have different ways where we write a normal anonymous function, and second, which is very famous nowadays, is known as arrow function, because we'll be using an arrow symbol over here. This is also known as fat arrow function. And in other programming language, the same arrow function is known as lambda function. In terms of Python, it is known as lambda. In terms of Java, we use this symbol as an arrow for using streams and all. Okay, so this is also possible in terms of JavaScript or TypeScript, that we can use an arrow function as well. We'll discuss each and every types of function in detail. So let's start with first, which is basic way of creating a function in terms of TypeScript is a named function. Okay, so first and very basic is a named function. Now let's try to concentrate over here that how do we declare a function? Declaration of function is entirely different in terms of TypeScript, JavaScript, and if you have worked on Java or Python earlier. So declaration of a function will be entirely different. What is named function? First, we are trying to discuss regarding the named function. So what is named function? A function which will be declared, along with the name. That means a function which will have a name. Function which will have a name is known as named function. Okay, simple. A function which will have a name is known as named function. And let's see a syntax. How do we declare a function, a named function? So if we see the syntax for this, syntax is just try to concentrate here. It is entirely different in terms of how do we declare a JavaScript and TypeScript function. And currently we are trying to declare a named function. So let's try to see how do we declare the named function. The syntax for the named function is it will start with function keyword. It will start with function keyword. Whenever and wherever you see a function keyword, for wherever and whenever you see a function keyword inside your coding, you can easily understand that that is basically a function that have been declared inside JavaScript or TypeScript. Okay, that is a simple notation of identifying the function. It start with a function keyword. Okay, it start with a function keyword and then you can provide a function name. As we are trying to declare a named function, so you can provide a function name. It can optionally take a parameter over here. Okay, and then again a block of code will start. That means inside a curly braces, we can write block of code. Whatever the function that is intended for will go inside inside the curly braces. Okay, this is the general syntax of declaring a function using function name, declaring a named function. Okay, and then whenever we have to call this function, that means okay, we have declared a function, but how do we call this function? So to call this function, we can directly use a function name that we have given over here. And if there are any parameters, then for that we have to use an arguments. Okay. So to declare a named function, we have a syntax which is function name. It can optionally take a parameter as well if it requires to take. And then it will have a block of code which will go inside a curly braces. And at the time of calling, we basically call the function by using uh, function keyword by using a function name, whatever the name of the function that we have defined, we'll call the function by using the function name. And if it is taking any kind of parameter, then for that parameter, we have to provide an argument. So here, if you have listened it, then there is something that I said here it is parameter and here it is argument. So this will be again one of a part of interview question that what is difference between parameter and argument. Okay. So whenever we declare a function and if the function is also trying to get some kind of input, which is as part of the parameter, which is basically a parameter. So whenever we declare a function and if it is taking any kind of values from at the time of calling, either it can be numeric, either it can be string or any type of value, that is known as parameter. And whenever we call the function, and if that function is taking any kind of parameter, whatever the parameter that we declare at the time of calling is known as arguments. A simple example, I'll just show you a simple example as well. So this is in general a syntax, the complete syntax for how do you declare a name function. Okay, so let's see a very basic example over here. Let's see, guys. Console no name function. Okay, so now let's try to see how do we declare a function. Let's say if you have to add two values, right? Let's say if you have to add two values, how do we do that? So for that, we'll be writing a function. And how do we declare, how do we start writing a function? By using a keyword, which is function. So let's try to see the syntax. And based on the syntax itself, we'll be writing the function. We'll not be going outside of the syntax that we have in a, like at any point of time, not only currently, but any point of time, we will not be going outside of the syntax that it has given. So it says that it start with a function keyword. So we have to provide a function and then give a function name. So it can be add, let's say addition. We are trying to add two numbers over here. So I'll just say it as addition. Okay. Now, um, as it says like optionally a parameter, let's say we are trying to get two different values, two different parameter. So first we can say that like, okay, I'll get an A and I'll get a B. I've just declared a variable which is A and B over here. Now, one more thing that we have to understand that whenever we declare a parameter inside a function, we do not have to use any kind of keyword which is let or const. Okay, it will automatically consider these value, whatever the value that we use as a variable. Okay, and then it start with a curly braces. what we can say is, how do we do the sum of the values? We can directly write it as like, c let's say c and g, and then we can say it as a plus b. Okay, so let's try to understand it. What is happening over here? So we have declared a function using a function keyword, and then we have provided a name of the function, which is addition. Okay, and we have provided two parameters over here. We are saying that I'll require a two parameter, which is a. It says that parameter a implicit has any type, but a better type may be inferred from users. So what it says is, we have declared the two parameters, and that two parameters we are trying to add over here. Now you see, in terms of this, it is giving us a warning by saying three dots over here. But if you write the similar things in JavaScript, it will not, because TypeScript also says that what are the type that you are looking out for in terms of getting the data at the time of calling the values, right? So whenever we call the values, let's see first, like how do we call the value? By using a function. So this value that we are trying to get inside the function is known as a parameter. So this a and b are known as parameter. Now we are trying to call this function by function name, and then it requires a couple of parameters, right? So let's say I'll just say it as 10, 20. Now this 10 and 20 is known as an argument. Okay, this is also known as a call by value, because we are calling the function along with some kind of value. And this value that we have given is known as an argument. Okay, now if you hover over on this function, it says that a colon any, b colon any. That means as we have not given any value over here, as we have not provided any data type over here, it automatically consider this value as a data type of any. We have discussed one data type at the time of discussing data types, and that it is taking as an any if you do not provide any value. Okay, so here we know that this function is not returning anything. This function basically not returning any values. We are just trying to print, we have not returned any values. Okay, so what is, like in other programming language, if a function do not return any value, what do we note it as? We basically write something like this. Let's say in terms of Java, we write it as, let's say, public. Then we say it as void, and then let's say uh, some kind of name of the function. Name of the function, let's say I or info, and then we say it as system.out.println. Example. So whenever it do not return anything, we say it as a void type. That means the function is a type of void. The function is returning a void. That means it is returning nothing. Void means nothing. So here also in terms of this function, in terms of TypeScript, we can also say it as it returns us a void. So first thing, I'll uh, give an example that we also have to provide a data type over here in terms of TypeScript. So we can provide it over here, something like colon number. So that means we are saying that we require a number data type value itself. Earlier, it on hover on the function name, it was saying a colon any, b colon any, and now it is saying a colon number and b colon number because we have provided the data type. And if you try to use a string value over here, then it will automatically throw us an error. Whereas in terms of JavaScript, it will not throw an error because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language and it will decide at the time of runtime, not at the time of compile time. Here in terms of TypeScript, it is saying that you have assigned a type which is argument type is string, which is not assignable to a number. It is saying we have declared a number, but you are trying to assign a variable which is of type. We are trying to assign an argument which is of type string. Okay. So in this way, we can declare the function. We can also provide the data type over here. If you do not provide the data type, it will automatically take the data type as int. Now I talked about like we can also provide a void. So in terms of other programming language that we have, let's say in Java, we provide something void over here, writing after the just before the function name, right? Whereas in terms of TypeScript, if you want to provide the return type, then you can provide it after the parameter that you provide, after the basically parenthesis that you provide over here. So you can say it as colon and then void. Just before the curly braces starts, we have to provide the return type. Okay. So optionally it also take a return type over in terms of syntax. Okay. So this is a function which is taking a parameter and returning nothing. It is just printing us the value. So it does not return anything. We can directly call the value, call the function by using the function name. And as it is printing the value, so it will try to print us the value in the same way by just adding the two number that we have declared. Okay. So let's say you what is the name of the file, which is functions.ps. So if you see here, it has just printed as the value, which is 30. Okay, so this function is not returning anything. This function is also known as a parameterized function. This is a parameterized function. Why? Because it is taking a couple of parameters. Parameterized function and a void function, which is not returning anything. Void function, which is not returning anything. Okay, let's see an example where it returns the value for us. So we can use the same value, which is same type of function. Instead of console.log, we can return the value. So if you say over here, let's say add, just an add as a function name. It is taking a couple of parameters, which is A and B. And now we can directly say it as return A and B. Whenever we have to write a return, we have to use a keyword, which is return. So that means this function is returning us the sum of two numbers. Now you see the error over here. It says that type number is not assignable to type void. That means we are trying to return some of the value and then we have declared a void over here. That means we are saying this function is not returning anything, but we have used a keyword which is return. So whenever we use a return keyword, we have to provide the value, either whatever the value it has to return. So either you have to remove this so that based on the data type that we have used, it will automatically identify. Or if you want to specifically mention, then just mention the data type over here, what kind of data type that it is trying to return us. Okay, so if you see over here, let's say string, then it will throw you an error because it says that type, we have declared a type as number is not assignable to string. Because we have received the value as number over here and we are trying to add those values. So it will never return us in terms of string. But if you make it as, let's say, string, then it will be able to return, because whenever we add two values as a part of string, it will concatenate the value, right? So here, if we say like, let's say, let's try to see it up. So this function is basically returning us some kind of value, right? So how do we call for first function? By using a function name. Then we can say it as, let's say, 20, and then second parameter in terms of number. Like I've given a string and a number. And whenever we add two string or one string and a number, those will be concatenated, will not be added. This is returning some value. So you can store it inside, let's say, variable, which I'll just say it as sum, and then do a CLJ, which is console log sum. Okay. So what we are trying to do over here is we are trying to add two values, which one is in the part of string and other is in the part of number. Now, if you try to execute this code, you will see that it has concatenated the value. Concatenate means merge those two values, which is it becomes 20 and 10. But if you again say it over here as number, then it will throw us an error because It will never return any number value, and we cannot pass an argument which is of type something which is string, because we have declared a number. Now again, if you try to execute this line of code, you will see that it has added because it is returning. So we have, as it is returning some of the value, then we have to store that value at some places. For that, we have declared a variable which is sum, and inside that sum we have like return, like receive the value from the function, and then that we are trying to print. Able to understand? Any confusion question?
Yeah, Praveen, in test automation, how can I decide like function is required and now we should create a function? Like what will be the case to create the function in test automation?
Hmm. Right. So what happen in general is whenever we create a function, we know that uh, why do we create a function is that, let's say if we have to use a single line of code, we can directly use that the single line of code. Whenever we have to do like couple of lines of code, which we know that that will be used multiple times in our test automation. So that is what I was saying, right? In why do we use a function? Because it will be reusable going forward as well. So example, let's say we have a login page, right? We have a login page where inside the login page, we'll get the username, we'll get the password, and then we'll click on the login button, right? So fill username, fill password, and then click on login button, right? So let's say if we write the code for username, for password, and clicking on login button. So this will take a 3 lines of code. Fill the username, fill the password, and then click on login button. So this will be a complete total 3 lines of code, right? Now, we also know that whenever we have to automate any kind of things inside our application or inside any of the application, we first require to log in into the application, right? So we first require to log in into the application every time for each and every test case. Let's say if you have 100 test case, then you have to log in the application for 100 times before running each and every test case, right? So for this, we have to write 3 lines of code. These kind of things we can mark it as place it inside a function. Why? Because we know that these 3 lines will be used for all the 100 test case. So we can make it as a function. Inside a function, we can provide a name or name of the function or unnamed function, and that function we can directly use wherever and whenever it requires. For all the 100 test case, let's say if we write all these 3 lines of code, if we write for all the 100 test case, basically we'll be writing the same lines of code 300 times, or at least 100 times the same 3 lines of code, right? And let's say if there are locators or if there are some kind of things have changed for one particular value, then we have to go and change for all the 100 times that we have declared all these 3 lines of code. Instead, we make it as a function, and then that function we can utilize wherever and whenever we require. Even if there will be any kind of change in terms of the lines that we have written inside the function, we just have to change at one place, and all the other places will work uh, efficiently. So whenever you see that something which is usable multiple number of times, that we can write as a function. Okay, does it answer your question?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay,
Hi,
okay.
Praveen. This
So
is Agni. Yeah, sorry to
mhm.
interrupt you. I have a question, Praveen. I am not getting, sometimes we are returning in function. So how do we know we should return, or can you please explain it again?
Hmm. So see, there are different ways in which we can write a function. Okay. So sometimes what happen is like you can directly print the value, whatever the action that we're trying to do, we can directly print the value. And sometimes we have to return. So when do we have to return is, let's say if you are trying to validate some kind of condition. Okay. let's say this function you have written for sum of the two number. And again, if you have to validate whether the sum of the two number is matching with our current like the requirement that we want to check. So example, we have a test case to validate if we add 3 and 5, it should give us a value as 8. Example I'm talking about. A very simple example in terms of understanding, right? So what do we do is, if we write in this way, which is we are trying to print the value. So let's say, how do we do that? So what we'll be doing is, if in general, how we'll be validating is 3 plus 5 equals to 8. Or if 3 plus 5 equals to 8, then we'll just say it as, let's say, console log. Let's say example, the sum is correct. The sum is correct. Else what we'll say it as console.log something like CLG, and then we'll say it as the sum is incorrect. Okay. We know that this 3 plus 5 that we have written over here will always be equal to 8. But let's try to see what is happening over here. So it is saying that the sum is correct because we know that 3 plus 5 equals to 8. Now let's say if we have to get these kind of value, we have to get the sum that we are trying to do from other functions, from the function that we have written. So example, we have written two functions over here, which is addition, right? Let's take an example for this. So we are saying that we will get a value which is 3 comma 5. So we have given a 3 comma 5 over here. Now we are trying to make a condition that this is also basically doing, which is addition of the values, right? This is also trying to do addition of value, which is 3 and 5. But here it is trying to just print the value. So it will return it. It basically give us directly a value which is 8. It will print us the value, but it will not return us. So in terms of comparison, we cannot use this function, because if you hover over on this, it says that this comparison appears to be unintentional because the types that we have declared is a void. That means we are saying this function is not returning us anything. If it is not returning us anything, then if we have to compare anytime in terms of test automation, and we have to utilize again the function, that function has to be of a returning type. That means it has to return some kind of value. As we say it over here as a void, let's even remove this. At that point of time also, it will automatically consider a void type, because we are just printing the value, we are not returning anything, right? And if you have to compare the result of this function, if you have to compare, or if you have to validate whether that is true or false, then we'll not be able to use whenever the function is not returning anything. But if you use the add that we have written over here, which is returning us some kind of value, so we can easily use this value at the time of some kind of validation, which is a simple validation that we have done over here, which is add 3 plus 5. Now, in this case as well, if you try to execute the code, you will see that it will return us some kind of value, which is the sum is correct. Okay, so whenever we use a function and we are trying to do some kind of validation by calling those functions at any point of time in terms of test automation, at then and there we can basically declare a return type. That means return value, so that we can catch it over here and then compare the value. What it will happen is it will return us a value over here. So it will return us 8. Whereas here that we have written a void, it will not return, it will just print on the console level. That means it print us the output. Whenever we try to run the code, it print us the value over here, right? Here, but in this case, it will return the value over here, which it will automatically become 8. Okay, so whenever you see that you have to call a function and you have to validate, or you have to validate some kind of things in terms of the coding, in terms of test automation, at that point of time, you can write a function which returns us some kind of value. Okay. Does it answer your question, Agni?
Yeah, Praveen. Okay, thanks.
If you still have any doubt, just let me know so that I can explain you again multiple times. Okay. So that's about the function that we have declared using named function. We have also seen a parameterized function. This is like parameterized function. And if you do not declare any function parameter, then that will be an like non-parameterized function. What is meant by non-parameterized is again will be declared using a function keyword. Just let's say it as info, and then we can say it as, let's say, console.log. This say console.log by just saying a CLG and print some kind of value, which is, let's say, welcome to TypeScript. So this is a function which is non-parameterized function. That means we have not declared any parameterization over here. No parameter we have declared for this function is known as non-parameterized function. And again, we can call the function using the info itself. Now, the function name itself. And again, if we try to run this value, we'll see that it will print us the value. This is like non-parameterized function. Welcome to, so see it as welcome to TS over here. This is a non-parameterized function where we did not declare any parameter, and these are parameterized function where we declare a couple of parameters for the function. Okay, so I'll just stop it over here. And we'll continue again in the next session with some other type of functions that we'll go through with anonymous function, like different types of anonymous function in our next session.